They drove away so fast I didn't even see their brake lights, just the cold white glow of the rest stop lamps and the dust left by my daughter's SUV. At 79, I thought I'd seen every kind of humiliation a family could give a woman, but being left at a highway rest stop at 1 in the morning had never made the list. I stood there in my beige coat, clutching my purse like it could warm me. It couldn't. Nothing really could. Not after the way Karen said, "Mom, we just need space. Get out for a moment." And the moment turned into them driving off with the doors locked. The trucks roared past, making the pavement tremble. I didn't tremble. Not outside, anyway. Maybe age does one useful thing. It teaches you to shiver on the inside only. I walked to the bench near the vending machines, sat down slowly, and took out the small spiral notebook I always kept in my purse. I bought it 2 years ago thinking I'd write down recipes. As it turned out, recipes weren't the only things worth noting. 1:07 a.m., I wrote. Left at rest stop. Highway 14N. Temperature cold, mind clear. That last line surprised even me. Clear. That's not how a woman should feel when her own daughter and son-in-law abandon her like forgotten luggage. But clarity has a sharpness to it, and that sharpness cut straight through the confusion I'd been living in for years. The excuses, the apologies I made for them, the bending until my back ached. All of it slid away in that cold air. A car pulled in, just a young couple arguing about something useless. They paid me no attention. Good. I needed the quiet. I replayed the evening, the forced smiles at dinner, the moment David sighed dramatically because I asked if we could go home. I was tired. My hip hurt. And then Karen's whisper, sharp and embarrassed. "Mom, you make everything difficult." Then the sudden stop at the rest area, their clipped voices, the door shutting behind me, and the engine revving. I wrote again. Not accidental. Decision made long ago. Tonight only revealed it. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the sky to shift a shade darker. Long enough for the loneliness to turn into something sturdier. A patrol car eventually pulled in. The officer rolled down his window, brows raised. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "Not really," I said. "But I'm not in danger, just stranded." He asked what happened. I didn't cry. I didn't embellish. I told him plainly, my daughter and her husband drove off and left me here. His face changed, softened first, then tightened. He called dispatch, then helped me into the warm car. I held the notebook tightly. It felt like the only thing that belonged to me. As he drove, he said gently, "Family stuff can be messy." "Yes," I answered. "Especially when you stop pretending it isn't." He didn't pry after that. Good man. Silence is sometimes the best company. When we turned into my neighborhood, the houses slept the way people do when they believe nothing is wrong in their world. The officer walked me to the door, made sure I could get inside. I thanked him, then stood alone in my small hallway, coat still on, block cold air still in my lungs. I opened my notebook again. This is the night I begin paying attention. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But for the first time in years, the quiet didn't make me feel invisible. It made me feel awake. And that was more frightening for my family than anything that happened at that rest stop. The house felt colder than the rest stop, though the thermostat was set where it always was. Maybe coldness isn't about temperature at all. I hung my coat on the chair instead of the hook. I didn't trust my legs just yet. I sat for a moment, hands flat on the table, listening to the refrigerator hum like an old companion. It struck me that the hum had been in my life longer than Karen's kindness. Footsteps hurried down the hallway. Light ones. Only one person in this house still walked like someone who wasn't afraid to feel. My granddaughter, Lily. "Grandma, is that you?" She appeared in her oversized t-shirt, hair tangled, face troubled. 17, still soft around the edges, not yet sharpened by adult disappointments. "Yes, it's me," I answered. She stopped when she saw my shoes still on. Her eyes widened. "Where were you? I woke up and Dad said—" She cut herself off, pressing her lips into a thin line. I knew that look. The look of someone who's already caught one lie tonight and fears the next. I didn't want to burden her. Not with this. But she stepped closer, knees slightly bent, like she was bracing herself. "Grandma, what happened?" "They left me at a rest stop," I said quietly. No dramatics. It didn't need embellishment. The truth carried its own weight. She blinked, stunned. "Left you? Like, on purpose?" I nodded. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she shook her head slowly, the way a person does when something rearranges itself inside them. I knew they were being awful, but this— "Grandma, this is insane." I didn't answer. She sat down beside me, her hand covering mine. Her hand was warm. Mine felt like paper. "Did you call the police?" "They picked me up," I said, "and brought me home." Her face changed again. Anger now, quiet, controlled, the kind that starts deep. "Dad said you went for a walk to clear your head. He said you didn't want anyone waking you when you got back, so I shouldn't worry." She exhaled sharply. I knew he was lying. He does that thing with his eyes when he lies. I made a small note in my notebook. Lily sees truth. Important. She leaned closer. "Grandma, why didn't you wake me when you got home? I would have stayed with you." "I know, sweetheart. But you have school tomorrow, and I needed to sit with myself for a moment." She frowned. "You shouldn't have to sit with something like this alone." I looked at her. Really looked. Somehow she'd grown up in this house without turning hard. A miracle, considering the atmosphere Karen and David created. Always rushing, always irritable, always pretending I was a misplaced object crowding their space. Yet Lily still chose gentleness. She squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" "I'm upright," I said. "For tonight, that's enough." She didn't smile. She understood it wasn't a joke. From the hallway came the sound of movement. Someone pretending not to listen, pretending not to be awake. Karen or David. Probably both. Whispering, doors shifting, people checking whether their story would hold once they had time to polish it. "Grandma," Lily whispered, "please promise me something. Whatever they say tomorrow, don't let them make you feel like it was your fault." I felt something crack softly inside my chest. Not pain, recognition. "I won't," I said. She nodded, satisfied in a way only a child who loves deeply can be. Good. They get away with too much already. Those words hung between us like a quiet verdict. "Go back to bed, sweetheart," I told her. "You need rest." "I'll go, but I'm not sleeping." She hesitated. "If you need me, knock on my door, okay?" "I will." She hugged me, longer than usual, and went back down the hall. After her door clicked shut, the house returned to its familiar, practiced silence. But I wasn't fooled anymore. Silence in this house wasn't peace, it was avoidance. I opened my notebook again, returned home. Police officer kind, Lily honest, Karen and David hiding. Then I wrote one more line. Tomorrow, bank. Not because of money, because truth has a trail, and I needed to see where mine had been taken. I snapped the notebook closed. The decision felt solid. like a stone placed carefully in the palm. A beginning, not dramatic, just real. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked under a cautious step. Someone was listening. Good. Let them hear. I didn't sleep that night. Not truly. I lay down for an hour or two, but my mind stayed upright, even if my body didn't. By 7 in the morning, the house began to stir the way it always did. Doors closing too loudly, coffee mugs clattering, the practiced tension of people who want to appear normal without doing the work of being normal. I heard Karen's voice first. Low, rehearsed. "Mom, are you awake?" She didn't ask out of concern. She asked the way someone checks a smoke alarm they hope is broken. "Yes," I said, sitting at the kitchen table with my notebook open. I didn't close it when she walked in. Let her see it. She wore her office blazer even though it was too early to leave. Her hair was perfectly smooth, as if control over her appearance could replace control over her guilt. "I heard you came home late," she said. "You should have called us. We would have picked you up." I looked at her calmly. "You drove away from me." A small flicker crossed her face. Shock, then irritation, then the glossy mask she used for difficult clients. "Mom, that's not fair. You got out of the car. You said you needed air." "I said I needed a minute," I corrected. "You decided that minute didn't include bringing me back." Her jaw tightened. She exhaled loudly, the way she always did when she wanted to end a conversation without resolving it. "Things got heated. You were criticizing us all dinner. I asked to go home because my hip hurt." "You made a scene," she snapped. "David felt attacked." David always felt attacked whenever he wasn't praised. I didn't bother pointing that out. I wrote something in my notebook, slowly, deliberately. Karen stared at the movement of my pen. "What are you writing?" she asked. "The truth," I said. She didn't like that answer. Her cheeks reddened. "Mom, this is getting out of hand. We were exhausted, and you've been so difficult lately. It's not easy having you here all the time." I nodded. Then leaving me alone at a rest stop must have felt like a relief. She flinched. Good. A human reaction at last. Before she could answer, David entered the kitchen, tying his tie. He looked at me the way one looks at an unpaid bill. "Morning," he said stiffly. Then, to Karen, "We need to go soon." He didn't greet me. He didn't ask what happened. He just hoped the problem would dissolve if ignored. I stood up. "I'll be going out today," I said, taking my purse. "Where?" Karen asked too quickly. "A few places," I replied. "Nothing you need to worry about." David frowned. "Do you need us to drive you?" I looked at him long enough for him to understand that question wasn't an offer. It was fear disguised as politeness. "No," I said. "I'll take a cab." Their eyes exchanged a glance, brief, nervous. As I walked toward the door, Karen followed. "Mom, please don't make today harder than it needs to be." I turned. Yesterday was hard. Today is honest. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Behind her, David muttered something under his breath, something that sounded like, "We don't deserve this." I didn't bother responding. People like him always believe the consequences of their actions are unfair. Outside, the cold morning air felt almost clean. I called a cab and waited on the curb, notebook in hand. I made another note. Day 1. No more ignoring the obvious. The cab arrived, driven by a woman about my age, silver hair cropped short. She glanced at me in the mirror. "Rough morning?" "A long night," I answered. She nodded. "Those can change a person." "Yes," I said quietly. They can. At the bank, the lobby was almost empty. A young teller greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I recognized the expression. Someone performing friendliness, not feeling it. I need to speak with a financial manager, I said. Privately. He nodded and led me to a small waiting area. A few minutes later, a woman in her 50s approached. Sharp eyes, steady posture. Her name tag read, Elaine Bradford. Mrs. Holt? She asked. Come with me. Her office was small but orderly. She gestured for me to sit. How can I help you today? I placed my notebook on the desk. I want to review every automatic withdrawal, every shared authorization, every joint access granted on my accounts. Elaine didn't flinch. Of course. Any specific concerns? Yes, I said. For the first time in a long time, I am concerned about myself. She studied my face briefly, reading the quiet between my words. She nodded. Let's begin, she said. She turned her monitor and began pulling up pages and pages of transactions. I saw the first numbers appear. Amounts, dates, companies I didn't recognize. And without a tremor in my voice, I said, print them all. Elaine clicked a few keys. The printer across the room began to hum. I didn't tremble then either. Not anymore. Elaine stacked the printed pages neatly before sliding them toward me. The pile was thicker than I expected. Years of numbers, each one a small doorway into choices I barely remembered making, or didn't make at all. Take your time, she said, folding her hands calmly. I'm here if you have questions. I didn't need questions at first, only breath. I began reading line by line. Insurance premiums I never signed up for. Subscriptions to services I didn't use. Payments labeled household support. Transfers to an account with David's initials. Every month, sometimes twice. I felt no shock, only confirmation. They've been accessing my funds for years, haven't they? I said. Elaine didn't answer immediately. The authorizations appear to have been signed by you. She turned one page toward me, gently tapping her finger under my signature. My signature. Long loops, long lines. Yes, it was mine. But mine from a time when I believed trust was the same thing as love. When Karen said, Mom, this just makes things easier for all of us. And I wanted her to want me around. Not just my housekeeping or my casseroles. Me. I remember signing, I said softly. But not understanding. Elaine remained quiet. It was a respectful silence. I took my pen and made a note in the margin of the printout. Understanding now. When I finished reading, I pushed the stack a few inches away. What are my options? Elaine straightened, professional but gentle. First, we can suspend all withdrawals, then revoke authorizations. You can reassign control of your accounts solely to yourself, and we can set up alerts so you are notified each time any transaction occurs. Do it, I said. All of it? All of it. She nodded and began typing. Her keystrokes were steady, precise. It felt like the sound of a lock turning, not trapping me, freeing me. As she worked, she asked, Do you feel safe in your current living arrangement? The question hovered in the air. I thought of last night. The dark highway. Karen's clipped voice. David's impatience. The cold that crept into my bones. I thought of Lily's warm hand on mine. Of the silence afterward. The kind that makes a person small. No, I said, but I'm not afraid. There's a difference. Elaine nodded. If you ever need help finding alternative housing or legal support, we can connect you to the right resources. I looked at her. Something in her tone wasn't pity, it was recognition. A woman who'd seen too many mothers emptied out by the people they raised. "I'll need legal support soon," I said. "But not today." She printed the new authorization documents and passed them to me. "Sign here. This reverses all previous access." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. It felt like I'd been waiting years to make this one stroke. When the signatures were done, Elaine walked me to the elevator. "Mrs. Holt," she said quietly, "you're doing the right thing." "I know," I replied. That's why it feels so strange. Outside, the morning sun had warmed the sidewalk. My cab hadn't arrived yet, so I sat on the bench near the entrance. Cars passed, people came and went, busy with lives that didn't intersect mine. I felt oddly unburdened. My phone buzzed. A message from Karen. "Mom, call me ASAP. We need to straighten out what happened. David thinks this is getting blown out of proportion." I stared at the screen. For years, I would have responded immediately, apologizing for something that wasn't my fault. Not today. I wrote in my notebook, "They want control back. They sense the shift." Then I typed a short reply. "I'm busy today." I didn't explain with what. Explanations were a currency I no longer used. A second message arrived. "Busy with what?" I didn't answer. The cab pulled up and I slid into the back seat. The driver, an older man with deep lines around his eyes, glanced at me in the mirror. "Beautiful day?" he said. "Yes," I answered, looking out the window. "For some of us, it's the first in a while." As we drove through the neighborhood, I thought about Lily. She'd be leaving for school soon, walking with her backpack crooked on her shoulder, her hair never brushed quite enough. The only person in that house who looked at me without calculation. She would need to hear the truth. Not the version Karen crafted. Not the excuses David perfected. My truth. Simple and unadorned. When I stepped out of the cab in front of the house, I saw Lily at the sidewalk, tying her shoelaces. She looked up the moment she heard the door. "Grandma, where'd you go this morning?" I walked toward her, my notebook in hand. "I needed to take the first step," I said. "Now I need to tell you about it." Her eyes softened, curious and worried. "Tell me everything," she said. And so I began. Lily walked beside me toward the house, her steps slowing the closer we came to the front door. She glanced at me the way people look at someone who's carrying something heavy but doesn't complain. I held my notebook at my side, almost like it was an extra limb now. "Grandma," she said quietly, "what did you mean by first step?" We reached the porch. I didn't go inside yet. I sat on the top step, and she sat beside me without hesitation. Morning light was still soft, washing the street in a pale gold that made everything look kinder than it really was. "I went to the bank," I said, "to check what's been happening with my accounts." Her eyebrows knit together. "And?" I opened the notebook, flipping to the newest page. "They've been moving money, more than I understood, more than I ever agreed to." Lily looked down, pushing a loose thread on her jeans. I thought something like that might be happening." I turned toward her slowly. "How long have you thought that?" She hesitated, then breathed out. "A year, maybe 2. I've heard arguments. Dad saying you owe them. Mom saying they're just using what's available." I didn't understand the details, but I knew it wasn't right. Her voice cracked on that last word. Right. She still believed in it. I envied her for that. "I should have told you sooner," she whispered. No, I said gently. It wasn't your responsibility. It was mine. I just finally chose to look. She nodded, though I saw the guilt still clinging to her shoulders. Children always think the storms in a house are somehow their fault. The front door opened then. David's shape hovered in the doorway, stiff and restless. He didn't step outside. "Oh," he said, as if finding us here had disrupted some script. "You're back." I didn't respond. Silence is its own kind of truth. Lily stood up, instinctively placing herself between us. David's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't like obstacles he couldn't push aside. "Your mother and I tried calling," he said. "We needed to talk about last night." "Last night was clear," I replied. "There's nothing to reinterpret." He shifted, one hand on the doorframe. "Look, we were all tired. You took things the wrong way." I opened my notebook and wrote without hurry. Lily tilted her head, reading upside down. "He says I misunderstood being abandoned." David bristled. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm documenting," I said, "so nothing gets blurred later." He looked genuinely unsettled by that. People who twist the truth are always nervous around the written version of it. Karen's voice floated from inside. "David, what is she saying now?" I closed the notebook. "This isn't the place for a discussion, and I won't be having one right now." David exhaled through his nose. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. We're family." "That word," I said softly, "has lost weight here." He didn't answer. He simply disappeared back inside as if retreating would make the truth fade. Lily sat again. "Grandma, what are you going to do now?" "More steps," I said. "Many of them." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Whatever happens, I'm with you. I hope you know that." I placed my hand over hers. "I do." A school bus rumbled down the street then, the sound mixing with the rustle of early wind. Lily stood up reluctantly. "I have to go," she said. "Please text me when you get back later, or call, or just something." "I will." She hugged me, tight, purposeful, and ran toward the bus stop. I watched her until she boarded. I waited until the bus turned the corner. Only then did I open my notebook again. Today, call lawyer, collect documents. No turning back. My handwriting looked different suddenly, firmer, like it remembered itself after years of being timid. Inside the house, two silhouettes moved behind the curtains, whispering, strategizing. Let them whisper. The next step was mine. By the time I reached the attorney's office, the morning had already sharpened into something decisive. The kind of morning when even the air feels like it's asking whether you're finally ready to stand up for yourself. I gave my name at the reception desk, and they led me to a small conference room with a long oak table. I sat at one end, notebook on my lap like armor. When Jennifer Marlowe entered, she wasn't what I expected. 63, hair the color of storm clouds, expression calm but alert. A woman who'd learned everything she knew the hard way. She greeted me with a firm handshake, respectful, not patronizing. "Mrs. Holt," she said, sitting down, "you mentioned the situation was urgent." "It is," I answered. "I need to protect what's mine, and I need to do it quietly." She folded her hands. "Tell me what happened." I didn't dramatize. I didn't minimize. I simply told her. The rest stop. The years of small erasures. The financial access I'd allowed because I believed that helping my daughter would keep us close. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her gaze steady, not pitying. When I finished, she sighed softly. "I hear stories like this more often than you might imagine. Not identical, but similar in shape. Children forgetting their parents are human beings, not resources. She opened a folder. We'll take it step by step. First, reclaiming full control of your finances. Then, restructuring your estate so that no one can pressure you in the future. Good, I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded like someone who'd stopped asking for permission. She printed a stack of forms and slid the first one toward me. Revocation of existing financial access. Once you sign, they will no longer be able to withdraw, authorize, or modify anything in your accounts. You'll receive alerts for every action. No surprises. No surprises. It felt like a prayer. I signed. Next came the documents concerning my will. I'd avoided thinking about it for years, because mothers always imagine there's still time for their children to change. But last night on that highway, time had stopped protecting illusions. I'd like to create a trust, I said. Something for my granddaughter only, not her parents. Jennifer nodded. A restricted trust for Lily, with protections to ensure her parents can't access or redirect the funds. You can designate age triggers, conditions, educational allowances, whatever you choose. I felt the tightness in my chest ease. Make it strong. She deserves at least one adult who thinks of her future and not their own comfort. We'll make it ironclad. We worked quietly for the next half hour. She explained every line, every implication. Not talking down to me, not rushing. It had been a long time since someone treated my mind as if it were still worth something. When the last signature dried, she leaned back. Mrs. Holt, I want to tell you something plainly. You are under no obligation to keep people in your life who treat you poorly, family or not. I closed my notebook slowly. I know, I said. I just needed someone else to say it out loud. She walked me to the door. If they react badly, and they will, call me before you respond. We'll handle it together. Thank you, I said, for not talking to me like I'm fragile. Jennifer smiled. You don't strike me as fragile. You strike me as someone who finally stopped pretending. Outside, the sky had warmed despite the early hour. I felt my steps steady as I walked toward the taxi stand. My phone buzzed again. Karen, then David, then Karen once more. I didn't open a single message. Instead, I wrote in my notebook. Today, I took my name back from their mouths. The wind moved lightly down the street, brushing against my coat. I breathed it in, letting it fill the hollows I'd ignored for too long. Age doesn't make you invisible, not unless you agree to vanish. And I was done agreeing. By the time I reached the house, the afternoon light had cooled into that pale shade that always makes the edges of things sharper. The driveway was empty, Karen and David's cars gone, but their absence didn't bring the peace it once did. It only meant the storm would come later. Inside, the house felt tense, as if the walls themselves had overheard my mourning. I set my purse on the table, hung my coat on the back of the chair, and sat for a moment with my hands folded. It struck me how often I'd sat here waiting for them, waiting to be useful, waiting to be needed, waiting to be forgiven for things I'd never done. Today, the waiting was over. My phone vibrated again. Karen, 4 messages now. A call. Another call. Then one from David. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, put water on to boil, and took a plain ceramic cup from the cabinet. I moved slowly, deliberately. It had been a long time since I'd moved like a woman who didn't expect to be interrupted. When the kettle clicked, I poured the water and sat down at the table. The first sip steadied me. I opened my notebook. This morning, reclaim. This afternoon, reinforce. Before I could write anything more, the front door opened. No knock, no hesitation. Just the sound of the key turning in a lock they believed belonged only to them. Karen's voice cut into the stillness. "Mom, we need to talk." I placed my pen beside the notebook and didn't look up. "Then close the door behind you. You're letting in the cold." She hesitated. I heard the door click, then her footsteps. Sharp, irritated. David followed more slowly, the way men do when they think observation alone might fix the mess they made. Karen stood across from me, arms crossed, eyes already rehearsed. "We've been calling you all morning." "Yes," I said. "And you're ignoring us?" "I'm choosing who I give my time to." That startled her. She wasn't used to my voice holding shape. David stepped forward. "The bank called us? Something's wrong with your accounts? They said you revoked access?" "Correct." "But why?" Karen demanded. "We've managed things for years. You never had a problem before." I looked at her openly. "I did. I simply stopped hiding it." She blinked rapidly, the way she did when anger and fear touched each other inside her. "Mom, you're being dramatic." "This is all because of last night. You're just upset." "Yes," I said. "I am upset. And I'm also awake." David exhaled in frustration, rubbing his forehead. "This is ridiculous. You're going to make things so much harder for all of us." "Harder?" I repeated. I was left alone at a highway rest stop at 1 a.m. Karen rolled her eyes, a gesture she used to diminish, not express. "We explained that. Things got heated. You overreacted." I pushed my notebook toward them. I wrote down exactly what happened. "I'm not negotiating the truth." Karen's voice rose. "Why are you doing this? You're hurting the family." "The family," I said slowly, "is hurting itself. I'm just refusing to bleed for it anymore." She fell silent then, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. David, however, leaned forward. "You talked to a lawyer, didn't you?" he asked. "Your attorney called the house asking to confirm your upcoming appointment." "And you answered my phone?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "It rang while we were trying to reach you. We were worried." "Worried about me," I said, "or worried about access?" He didn't respond. Not because he didn't know the truth, because he did. Karen's voice softened then, but the softness was performative, something she put on like a cardigan. "Mom, we're your family. We're supposed to take care of things. You know you need support." "I needed support last night," I said. "You drove away from me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth was too blunt to swallow. For the first time, I noticed how young she looked in her anger. 48, and still convinced control was the same as love. I stood up quietly, and both of them straightened, as if expecting a negotiation. "There's no discussion to be had today," I said. "What's done is done. My accounts are my own. My decisions are my own. If you need anything from me, you won't get it through intimidation or guilt." Karen's eyes glossed with a fury she didn't know how to contain. "So that's it? You're just cutting us off?" "No," I said. "I'm letting myself go." David muttered a curse under his breath. Karen grabbed her coat, movements abrupt. "You're being manipulated," she snapped. "Someone got into your head." "Yes," I said softly. "Me." They left without another word. The door shut harder than necessary. The house exhaled when they were gone. I sat again at the table, opened my notebook, and finally finished the sentence I'd started earlier. "This afternoon, reinforce, and remember, I am no longer afraid of the sound of their footsteps." For the rest of the afternoon, the house stayed unnaturally still, as if it were holding its breath after their shouting. I moved from room to room without aim, touching the edges of furniture I'd dusted for years, noticing how little of it actually belonged to me in feeling. Most of the things here were chosen by Karen, colors she approved of, arrangements she preferred, reminders that I was a guest in a place I paid for but did not own with my life. I ended up in the small back room they used to call my space, a narrow bed, a lamp that flickered, a window that looked out onto the fence. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting my hands rest on my knees. I thought about Jennifer's words. I thought about the blank expression on David's face, the twisting look in Karen's eyes. And then I thought about Lily, the only part of this house that still felt human. I heard her return before I saw her. The front door opened softly, not like her parents' door-slamming announcements. I heard her backpack drop, then her steps coming down the hallway. "Grandma?" she called, uncertain. "In here," I answered. She slipped into the room, closing the door gently behind her. Her face was flushed from the walk home, but her eyes were darker than usual, too knowing for her 17 years. "Mom and Dad were freaking out," she said quietly. "They won't tell me what happened. Dad said you're being irrational. Mom said you're endangering everyone's stability." She made a bitter little laugh. "Whatever that means." I shifted to give her space beside me, and she sat, curling one leg under herself. She looked at me the way someone looks at a candle they're afraid will go out. "Did they hurt you?" she asked. "Not in the way you mean," I said. "But yes." She nodded, eyes down, absorbing that truth like rain on dry ground. "They're scared," she murmured. "I've never seen them like this. Mom keeps walking around the kitchen muttering, and Dad keeps checking his phone like he's waiting for someone to fix things." "No one is coming to fix things for them," I said. Lily exhaled slowly. Good. Her honesty startled me, though it shouldn't have. She'd been watching everything for years, quietly, politely, but watching. "Grandma," she whispered, leaning closer. "I know what they've been doing. Maybe not all the details, but enough. The way they treat you. The way they talk about you when they think I'm not listening. You don't deserve any of it." I felt something shift in my chest, an ache, but also a small, warm light. I put my hand over hers. "You're the reason I'm not leaving this house angry," I said. "Only determined." She squeezed my hand hard. "Are you leaving?" "I will," I replied. "But not all at once, not in fear. When I walk out of here, it will be on my terms." She nodded slowly. "Good. I want you to have somewhere better. Somewhere that feels like you." We sat in silence for a long moment. Not heavy, just true. Then Lily straightened, her voice practical. "So what happens next? There's no version of this where Mom lets this go. She hates losing control." "Yes," I said. And today she lost it. Lily glanced at the closed door, then leaned in again. "I want you to promise me something. When things get worse, and they will, don't face them alone." I touched her cheek gently. "You're the only one in this house who hasn't asked me to disappear." "I never will," she said fiercely. Her loyalty, quiet, steady, felt like the first real kindness I'd been given in years. We heard a car in the driveway then, doors slamming, Karen's voice rising even before she crossed the threshold. Lily stood. "I'll deal with them," she said. "No," I answered softly. "Let them come. I'm not hiding." Lily hesitated, then nodded and slipped out. I stayed seated on that narrow bed, hands calm in my lap, as their footsteps approached. heavy, angry, unprepared for the woman who no longer belonged to them. Today, I thought, is the day they learn who I've become. Night has a way of peeling back the noise from the day, leaving only what you can no longer ignore. By the time the house settled into its late evening silence, I felt the weight of everything that had happened pressed against my ribs, not choking me, but insisting I feel it fully. Karen and David had retreated to their room hours ago. Doors slammed, voices hissed, drawers yanked open. And then, the quiet that comes after people run out of words, but not out of anger. Lily checked on me once more before bed, her eyes tired from carrying emotions she hadn't caused. When she finally slipped into her room, the hallway dimmed into its usual yellow gloom. I sat alone in the living room, lights off, only the street lamp reaching inside in a thin bar across the carpet. I held my notebook open on my lap but didn't write anything yet. My hands were warm, steady. My mind, clearer than it had been in years. This is what certainty feels like, I thought. Not loud, not triumphant, just settled. Somewhere above me, a floorboard creaked. David's slow pacing. Then the dull thud of a door shut too firmly. Karen's. They were preparing themselves for tomorrow, planning ways to reel me back in, to insist I had imagined everything. I didn't need to hear their exact words. I knew the shapes of their arguments. I had lived inside them too long. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. For a moment, I let myself imagine something simple, waking in a place that didn't echo with resentment. A kitchen where I could make tea without feeling watched. A morning without rehearsed apologies. Freedom isn't grand, it's quiet, barely noticeable until you taste it. When I opened my eyes, the room looked the same, but I wasn't the same woman in it. I finally wrote, "Tonight, let the silence finish its work." I set the notebook aside and stood slowly, my joints stiff but obedient. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark yard. The trees barely moved. Even the wind seemed to respect the stillness of the moment. I thought of my husband then, not sentimentally, but like remembering an old truth. He used to say, "If you stay quiet long enough, the truth rises on its own." He wasn't a complicated man, but he understood dignity better than anyone I've known. I whispered into the glass, "I'm learning late, but I'm learning." From down the hall came another sound, Lily's door opening softly, then her slow footsteps approaching. She peeked into the living room, hair tousled, blanket around her shoulders. "Grandma?" she murmured. "You're still awake." "So are you," I replied. She came closer, sat beside me on the arm of the chair. "I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about what they did to you, what they keep doing." I touched her hand. "Don't carry more than your share." "But I see everything, and I can't unsee it." Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from the strain of growing up too fast in a house that demanded silence from everyone. I slid my hand into hers, feeling how young she still was. Fragile in the places she didn't show. "You're not responsible for their choices," I said, "and I'm not undone by them." She rested her head lightly against my shoulder. "I wish you could leave already," she whispered. "I wish you had somewhere to go." I didn't answer at once. I watched our reflections in the window, hers young and unformed, mine lined and steady. Two women at different ends of life, both learning the same truth in their own ways. "I will leave," I said finally. "Not out of hurt, out of clarity." She nodded against my arm. "Good." We sat like that for a long minute, just breathing, not talking, not trying to fix anything. At last she whispered, "I'm glad you're waking up." "So am I said. She stood and kissed my cheek before returning to her room. Her footsteps faded down the hall. A door clicked shut gently. The house fell silent again, a silence I no longer feared. Karen didn't come home quietly. I heard her before I saw her. The rapid clicks of her heels across the entryway, the way she muttered to herself, gathering anger like some people gather breath. David hovered behind her, slower, his irritation like a shadow rather than a flame. Lily stayed in her room. She knew when a storm was coming. I was in the living room reading a newspaper I didn't care about, simply because I wanted to sit upright and calm when they approached. I didn't rise when Karen marched in. "We're talking," she announced, as if I needed permission. "You're talking," I said. "I'll be listening." That threw her off. Karen's confrontations relied on resistance. She didn't know what to do with calm. She crossed her arms. "Mom, we spoke with the bank. They said you revoked all existing authorizations. You understand how dangerous that is, right? You've made things unnecessarily complicated." "Dangerous for whom?" I asked quietly. "For all of us," she snapped. "We have bills, responsibilities, the household." "The household," I interrupted, "is something you and David manage, not something I fund." Her mouth tightened. "So you're punishing us?" "No. I'm correcting something that should have been corrected years ago." David stepped forward, hands half raised, as if framing an argument. "You're making assumptions. You think we're taking advantage of you, but you agreed to all those things. You signed every paper." "Yes," I said, "but I signed as a mother who trusted her child, not as a woman giving up ownership of her own life." Karen's face flushed. She wasn't used to hearing my reasoning delivered without shaking. "This is absurd," she said. "You're blowing everything out of proportion because you're upset about last night." I closed the newspaper. "Last night didn't create this. Last night revealed it." She let out a humorless laugh. "You're rewriting things to make yourself the victim." "I don't feel like a victim," I said. "I feel aware." David rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Look, can't we just put this behind us? You're overreacting. Families fight. Mistakes happen." "Leaving your mother at a highway rest stop is not a mistake," I answered. "It's a decision, and you made it together." Karen's voice suddenly dropped. "Mom, do you have any idea how hard it is living with the pressure we're under? You think everything is so simple, but you're not the one juggling work, bills, a teenager." "Lily is not a burden," I said. "She is the only person in this house who still speaks to me with kindness." That silenced both of them. For a moment, the room felt heavy, not with anger, but with truth they didn't want. Karen sat abruptly on the edge of the coffee table, as if her legs couldn't hold the weight inside her. "Mom," she said, quieter now, "we need your support. We need stability." "You don't want my support," I said gently. "You want my silence." Her eyes filled, not with sorrow, but with frustration at losing control of the narrative. "You're being manipulated," she repeated, her voice trembling with forced conviction. "That lawyer, she's filling your head with—" "No," I interrupted softly. "She simply spoke to me like I was still a person." Karen looked down, and for a moment I saw the child she used to be, thin-skinned, afraid of disapproval, desperate to be right. When she finally looked up again, her expression had hardened. "So what happens now?" she asked. "You just rewrite everything without considering us?" "I consider you," I said, "but I do not center you." David scoffed and walked out, muttering something about impossible women. Karen stayed a moment longer, watching me the way someone watches a door they wish would open the way it used to. "I don't understand you anymore," she said. "I'm not asking you to," I replied. "I'm asking you to understand that I won't be disappearing to make your life easier." She stood. "We aren't finished." "Yes," I said. "We are. For tonight." She left the room, steps sharp and brittle. When the door to their bedroom slammed, the house didn't tremble. I did not either. Lily knocked on my door just after 10, though knocked isn't the right word. She tapped gently, the way one taps on the shoulder of someone waking from a long sleep. I opened the door and she slipped inside, barefoot, wrapped in a thin sweater. "They're in their room," she whispered. "Still arguing, still blaming you for everything." "I expected as much," I said. She sat on the edge of my bed, legs drawn up, looking smaller than she had earlier. The house's tension pressed down on her, too, though she tried to hide it behind her usual quiet determination. "Can I stay here for a while?" she asked. "Of course." I turned on the small lamp, and its faint light softened her features. She looked tired, not from school or homework, but from living in a house where emotion cracked the air like static. "I heard what Mom said to you," she murmured, "about you rewriting everything. She always says things like that when she's scared." "She's not scared for me," I said. "She's scared of losing access." Lily nodded, then hesitated. "Grandma, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but do you think she ever loved you the right way?" I sat down beside her, the question settling between us like dust. "I think she loved me the way a child loves a parent she doesn't understand. And as she grew older, she expected me to shrink." "Shrink?" Lily tilted her head. "Yes. Into something smaller and easier. Something that didn't need anything. Something that only gave." She rested her chin on her knees. "I don't want to end up like her." I touched her shoulder. "You won't. You already see too much." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The muffled arguing from down the hall rose, fell, then went silent. That silence held a kind of fatigue, anger worn thin by its own weight. "Grandma," Lily whispered, "I think you should leave soon. Not because I want you gone. God, no. But because this house doesn't deserve you anymore." I looked at her, really looked. 17, and yet standing at the crossroads of understanding that some families can only love in the shape of taking. "I will," I said softly, "but I want you to know something first." She looked up. "I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving them." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears back. "I know." I continued, choosing my words slowly. "When I go, it won't be in anger. It will be because I'm choosing a life where I can breathe, and because I'm choosing to give you an example, not of bitterness, but of boundaries." Lily exhaled shakily. "Good. Because I want to grow up knowing it's allowed." I smiled, a small, tired smile, but a real one. It is allowed, even late in life. She leaned against my shoulder, and I stroked her hair, remembering the softness of her toddler curls. She stayed like that for a while, silent and warm until the tension in her body finally loosened. "Will you tell me before you go?" she asked. "Yes. You'll know every step." She nodded, satisfied, and rose slowly. "I should get back before they start wondering where I am. But thank you for today. For everything. Good night, sweetheart." After she slipped out, I closed the door and sat on the bed with my notebook resting across my knees. My room was dim and quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel like erasure, only rest. I wrote, "Tonight Lily stood with me, not as a child but as a witness, a person who sees truth without running from it. Then, beneath it, when I leave, it will be toward something, not away." I closed the notebook gently, as if sealing a decision inside it. Down the hall, a door shut loudly. Karen's. David's voice rose once, then stopped. The house was restless, but I wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt the weight shifting back into my own hands. The next morning, I woke before the sun, not from habit, but from clarity. Sleep had been shallow, but not troubled. I dressed slowly, choosing clothes not for anyone else's comfort, but for my own. A soft gray sweater, my oldest walking shoes. I packed my notebook into my purse and stepped into the hallway. The house smelled faintly of burnt toast. David's attempt at breakfast, likely thrown out after an argument. Their voices hadn't started yet, but the tension clung to the walls like humidity. I didn't linger. I walked straight to the front door and left without a sound. The air outside felt honest. Cold, but honest. At the cafe near the library, one of the few places in town where I could sit without being eyed like an inconvenience, I found a table in the corner. I ordered tea, opened my notebook, and stared at the empty page. There were no tears, no trembling, just a steady awareness that the next chapter of my life would begin in ink before it began in motion. I wrote, "Find a home with light. Find a home with a door that opens only from my side." Then I searched listings on my phone. A strange feeling washed over me, a mix of youth and age. I hadn't looked for a home in decades. Last time I did, my husband was alive, and Karen was a little girl with scraped knees and a stubborn smile. Now, it was just me. A small coastal town 2 hours away caught my eye. Not grand, not busy, just quiet. A tiny cottage with peeling paint and a small porch facing the water. The price was manageable. The photos felt honest. I called the number. A woman answered, soft voice, older, patient. We spoke for 10 minutes. By the end of the call, I'd scheduled a viewing for the following week. When I hung up, I didn't feel fear, only relief. One step at a time, I reminded myself. I didn't need to run. I only needed to stop standing still. My tea grew cold as I made a list, documents to gather, items to pack, conversations I would not have. I would tell Lily first, then Jennifer. Karen and David would learn in due time, but not from my explanations. Explanations were another currency I was done spending. By noon, I returned to the house. Their cars were in the driveway. The front door was half open, voices leaking out. Frustrated, tired, circling the same arguments they'd failed to win last night. When I stepped inside, Karen stopped mid-sentence. David turned sharply, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. "Where were you?" Karen demanded. "Out," I said. "Thinking." David crossed his arms. "We're still trying to understand what's going on with you." "I'm making decisions," I replied. "That's all." "What decisions?" Karen's eyes narrowed, but there was fear beneath it. "The kind I should have made a long time ago." She glanced quickly at David, as if asking him to intervene. He didn't. He simply watched me with the wary expression of a man who knows the balance has shifted and doesn't know how to regain footing. "Mom," Karen said slowly, "you're not planning anything drastic, are you?" "I'm planning something necessary," I answered, "and something peaceful." Her voice sharpened. Meaning what? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. Meaning my life is mine again. For a moment, she looked as if she might cry, not from sorrow, but from losing her grip on a role she built around my silence. But no tears came. Only more questions, all of them frantic. I didn't answer them. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked past both of them and went to my room. I closed the door gently, not as a wall, but as a boundary. A real one, finally. Sitting on the bed, I opened my notebook again and added, "Decision made. Now I prepare." The house hummed with confusion outside my door, but inside, for the first time in years, there was quiet that belonged to me. And that was enough, for now. They came for me in the early evening, as I knew they would. Manipulators hate a vacuum. When their grip slips, they rush to reclaim it. I heard them in the hallway. Karen whispering urgently, David breathing hard as if preparing for a physical task rather than a conversation. I stayed at my desk, sorting papers into neat piles, documents for the lawyer, documents for the cottage viewing, and a stack of things I intended to leave behind. The quiet rustle of paper felt like a shield. Karen knocked once, too softly to be sincere. Then she opened the door without waiting. "Mom," she said, stepping inside with an expression she must have practiced in the mirror. Concern stretched thin over fear. "We need to talk. Properly this time." David followed her in. His eyes scanned the stacks of papers, and I saw the tension ripple through him. He wasn't good at pretending. I folded my hands calmly. "All right," I said. "Talk." Karen sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her hair, a gesture she used when she wanted to seem composed. "We've been thinking," she began, "and we realized things have just escalated. You're overwhelmed, and it's understandable, but we can fix this." "Nothing is broken on my side," I replied. Her jaw clenched, but she pushed on. "If you restore the financial access, we can go back to how things were. We'll help you with bills, appointments, everything." "I don't need help with my life," I said. "Just space to live it." David stepped forward slightly. "This is getting out of hand. You're acting like an enemy, not family." I looked at him carefully. "Family doesn't abandon you at a rest stop." He flinched, not visibly, but inwardly, like someone tapping a bruise they hoped had faded. Karen shook her head quickly. "You keep bringing that up." "Because it happened," I said. "And because you refuse to acknowledge what it meant." She swallowed. "We told you. It was a mistake." "No," I said. "It was a choice. And it clarified everything." David exhaled loudly. "We're not bad people, Marion." "I didn't say you were," I answered. "I'm saying you're not good to me." That silence afterward was heavy and honest, the kind that removes every exit from a conversation. Karen's eyes hardened. "So what? You're planning to run away? Start a new life at 80? Don't be ridiculous." I felt a calmness settle inside me that surprised even me. "I'm not running. I'm walking toward a life where my presence isn't an inconvenience." David stepped closer. "We deserve to know what you're planning." "No," I said gently. "You don't. My decisions are no longer committee discussions." Karen's breath caught. "What about us? What about our future?" "Your future," I said, "is built on your own choices, not on my compliance." Her voice cracked then, thin, sharp. "You're being selfish." I shook my head. "No, I've been selfless to the point of disappearing. I'm simply stopping." David's expression changed, not anger now, but calculation. "Is this about the will?" he asked. "Are you changing it?" I didn't look away. "Yes." Karen's face went pale. You're punishing us. I'm protecting myself, I replied. There's a difference. For a moment, neither spoke. Their power, the power they'd relied on for years, was slipping like sand between their fingers, and they felt it fully. Karen rose abruptly, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. You're making a mistake, she said. And when everything falls apart, don't expect us to pick up the pieces. I met her gaze. You've never picked up mine. David opened his mouth, then closed it. They walked out together, not speaking to each other, their unity held together only by shared offense. When the door shut, the room remained still, soft, almost relieved. I gathered the last of the documents into their envelopes. No shaking hands, no second thoughts. I wrote in my notebook. They came to reclaim what they believed they owned. They left with the truth. I was never theirs to manage. When I set the pen down, I felt something inside me settle. Quiet, final, strong. The next morning, the air felt unusually still, as if the house itself was waiting. I woke early, dressed without hurry, and folded the last of my documents into my purse. Today wasn't the day I would leave, but it was the day I would make it clear that nothing they said or did could reverse what had already shifted inside me. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the low rumble of voices from the hallway. Karen and David had been whispering since dawn. Their panic spread thin across every syllable. When I didn't approach them, they came to me. Karen walked in first, her face blotchy from a night of restless anger. David followed, jaw clenched too tightly, as if he were holding in the last of his patience. We need to talk, Karen said. This time, her voice held no rehearsed softness, just fear dressed as authority. I stirred my tea, then set the spoon down gently. Go ahead. Karen inhaled deeply, steadying herself. We talked last night, and we think you're making decisions without understanding the consequences. I understand them perfectly, I said. No, she insisted. You don't. You can't just cut us out. You can't change your will without consulting us. That affects the entire family. The entire family, I replied, had the opportunity to treat me as part of it. David stepped closer, frustration leaking into his voice. This whole thing is out of proportion. You're acting like we're villains. You're not villains, I said gently. You're just people who chose yourselves at my expense. He faltered at that. Truth tends to do that to those who avoid it. Karen shook her head, pacing a few steps, then stopping abruptly. We think you're being influenced. That lawyer, you barely know her. You've never made decisions like this before. I've never been left alone on a highway before, I reminded her. She flinched. Every time I repeated that fact, her composure cracked a little more. We apologized, she said tightly. What more do you want? I want honesty, I replied, and I want dignity, neither of which I've had in this house for years. Karen's eyes darted toward David, silently asking for backup. He stepped forward, hands on his hips. If you go through with this, he said, you're tearing this family apart. No, I said. I'm stepping out of what's already torn. The room fell quiet. Not peaceful, charged. Karen's voice dropped to a strained whisper. So what, Mom? You're really going to rewrite everything? Leave us with nothing? After everything we've done for you? I looked at her, not as my daughter, but as a woman who had built her life on the assumption that I would never resist. You did not take care of me, I said. You managed me. There's a difference. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was losing ground she didn't know how to defend. David tried one more angle. You're making irrational choices because you're hurt. If you leave, if you change your will, you'll regret it. I will regret only one thing, I said softly. That I allowed this to go on for so long. Karen's posture collapsed, not dramatically, but visibly. She sat at the table, pressing her fingers to her temples. Mom, I don't know how to talk to you anymore. I don't need you to talk to me, I replied. I need you to listen. She looked up slowly, eyes glossy with frustration and something else. Fear of a world where I wasn't under her control. I will be leaving, I said. Not today, but soon. You will not stop me. You will not guilt me. You will not access anything that belongs to me. I will live the years I have left with peace. David shook his head, muttering, Unbelievable. Karen swallowed. And Lily? You're going to leave her too? No, I said. I'm leaving her an example. They didn't understand. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I stood, took my tea, and walked past them toward my room. Neither followed. Neither spoke. They were too stunned by the version of me they had never prepared themselves to meet. In the quiet of my room, I opened my notebook and wrote, Clarity given. Boundaries drawn. Nothing left to negotiate. The house around me felt smaller, tighter, but I no longer felt trapped inside it. I was already stepping out. I left before dawn, not as an escape and not in secrecy. I moved the way one moves after finishing a long conversation with themselves, steady, without hesitation. The house was silent when I stepped into the hallway, but not the hostile silence it had held for years. More like a place that finally understood I did not belong to it anymore. I paused at Lily's door. I didn't wake her. I had promised her she would know every step, and she did. The night before, we had sat together, talking quietly about the cottage by the water, about afternoons with no shouting, about air that didn't carry tension like dust. Her eyes had shone, not with sadness, but with something like relief. You deserve somewhere soft, she'd whispered. So do you, I'd answered. I left a note on her desk. Simple, honest, written in my clearest hand. Come visit when you can. I'll always have a place for you. I knew she'd understand the weight beneath the words. Outside, the sky was pale and wide. The taxi pulled up and I settled into the back seat, my purse on my lap, my notebook inside it. Everything else I left behind. Pots, linens, the old lamp, the chair whose cushions sagged where I had sat too many nights waiting for people who were not waiting for me. Some things are not worth carrying into a new life. The town grew smaller behind us. The grocery store where Karen complained about prices, but filled the cart anyway. The park where I used to push Lily on the swings. The rest stop road hidden beyond the trees. A place I would never forget and never return to. Not with my body, at least. My memory could make its own choices. 2 hours later, the taxi turned into a narrow street that sloped gently toward the water. The cottage stood at the end, pale blue with worn shutters and a porch that leaned slightly to the left like an old friend with a sense of humor. The sea was only a few steps beyond it, its breath steady, patient. I got out slowly, feeling the ground beneath me, firm and mine. The woman from the listing, Margaret, waved from the porch. Gray hair in a braid, kind eyes, the posture of someone who doesn't rush unless there's a reason. Mrs. Holt? She asked. Yes, I said. You came early. I've been late to enough things in my life. She smiled at that, a real one, and handed me the keys. "It's ready for you whenever you are." I turned the key in the lock. The door opened with a soft sigh. Inside was a small living room, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor. Clean, quiet, waiting. No raised voices. No footsteps demanding explanation. No tension clinging to the walls. Just space. Just air. Just my life. I set my purse on the old wooden table, took out my notebook, and placed it beside the window where the light touched the pages. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to write immediately. The space itself held the words. I sat on the porch steps and watched the tide move in and out, slow and sure, as if reminding me that beginnings aren't loud. They're rhythmic. My hands rested in my lap, empty and light. I thought of Lily. I thought of her growing into her own strength, seeing in my choice a map she didn't know she'd one day need. I thought of Karen and David, too, not with bitterness, but with distance, the kind that grows naturally when someone stops feeding the roots. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, I felt it on my face, a small, steady warmth. I whispered, almost to myself, "This is mine, not borrowed, not tolerated, mine. And if someone reading these words has spent too many years shrinking into the corners of their own life, I hope they hear this quietly. You are allowed to take your name back. You are allowed to walk toward the door that opens for you. You are allowed to begin again at any age."